Hello, friends. Today, I want to tell you about a man who saved the Soviet Union from total annihilation and spent the rest of his life being punished for it. His name was Georgy Zhukov. He commanded the defense of Moscow. He broke the siege of Leningrad. He led the final assault on Berlin. And when the war ended, when the parades were over and the medals had been pinned, Joseph Stalin looked at this hero and saw the most dangerous threat to his power that had ever existed. So he did what he always did. He destroyed him. Not with a bullet, something slower, something that would take decades. He turned the greatest general of the 20th century into a ghost in his own country. This is a story about victory and what it costs when the man you saved cannot forgive you for being loved. It is a story about humiliation as statecraft, and it is a story about how you survive when survival means watching yourself get erased. Let's go. Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov was born in 1896 in a village so poor that hunger was not a crisis but a season. His father was a shoemaker. His mother could not read. He was sent to work as a furrier's apprentice at age 10. Moscow was a different planet. The first time he saw a tram, he thought it was magic. He joined the Imperial Army in 1915 because there was a war and because staying in the village meant starving. He fought the Germans. Then he fought for the Reds in the Civil War. Then he stayed in the army because the army was the only thing he knew how to do and the only place a boy from nowhere could become something. By 1939, he was a general. Not because of connections. He had none. Not because of ideology. He barely spoke the language of Marxism-Leninism. He rose because he was good at war, tactically brilliant, physically fearless, and totally unsentimental about casualties. In the summer of 1939, Soviet forces clashed with the Japanese at Khalkhin Gol on the Mongolian border. It was a border skirmish that could have ignited a second front. Zhukov took command. He encircled the Japanese. He destroyed them. He used combined arms tactics that nobody in the Red Army was supposed to understand yet, and he did it without asking permission for anything. Stalin noticed. Now let's talk about Stalin and Zhukov, because the relationship between them was real, and it was complicated, and you need to understand it to understand everything that came after. Stalin respected exactly one quality in other men: competence that could not be faked. Zhukov had that. He did not flatter. He did not grovel. He did not show up to meetings with lists of names to denounce. He showed up with maps and casualty projections and operational plans that worked. In the first months of the war, when the Wehrmacht was destroying entire Soviet armies in a week, when generals were being shot for retreating, when the Politburo was on the edge of panic, Zhukov walked into Stalin's office and told him the truth. Moscow could be held. Kiev could not. The Southwest Front had to retreat or be annihilated. Stalin hated it. But Zhukov was right, and Stalin knew he was right. So he did something he almost never did. He listened. Zhukov saved Moscow in the winter of 1941. The Germans were 15 miles from the Kremlin. Soviet intelligence said they were preparing a final push. Zhukov counterattacked. He hit them in the snow with Siberian divisions the Germans did not know existed. He pushed them back 60 miles. It was the first major German defeat of the war. The world noticed. Stalin noticed. Zhukov broke the siege of Leningrad. He planned the encirclement at Stalingrad. He coordinated the destruction of Army Group Center and Operation Bagration, the largest defeat in German military history. And on May 2, 1945, he accepted the German surrender in Berlin. The man who had started the war as a corps commander ended it as the single most famous soldier in the world. Eisenhower called him the greatest general of the war. Newspapers in London and New York ran profiles. His face was on the cover of Time magazine. And that was the problem. Try to put yourself inside Stalin's head for a moment. You are the man who built the cult. You are the genius. You are the father of the people. You are the reason the Soviet Union exists and the reason it won. That is the story. That is the only story. And now there is another story. A story where a peasant boy from nowhere saved the country while you hid in Moscow. A story where the soldiers loved Zhukov more than they loved you. A story where maybe the wrong man got the credit. Stalin could not kill him, not right away. Zhukov was too famous, too loved. Shooting him would create a martyr. So Stalin did what he always did when he could not destroy someone outright. He humiliated him, slowly, methodically, publicly. It started in June 1945, 1 month after victory. Zhukov was commanding the Soviet occupation forces in Germany. Stalin recalled him to Moscow. No explanation, just an order. Come home. When Zhukov arrived, Stalin did not see him, not for days. He was left waiting. When the meeting finally happened, Stalin was cold, clipped. He told Zhukov he was being reassigned, not to Berlin, not to a posting of honor, to Odessa, a provincial military district, a backwater. The greatest general of the war was being sent to manage a garrison on the Black Sea. Zhukov said nothing. He saluted. He went. But it was not enough. In 1946, Stalin authorized what became known as the Trophy Affair. Investigators from the Ministry of State Security arrived in Odessa. They searched Zhukov's home. They cataloged everything: paintings, furniture, carpets, silverware, furs. Some of it had come from Germany. Some of it had been gifts. Some of it Zhukov had requisitioned the way every Soviet general requisitioned things during the war. It did not matter. The investigators wrote reports. The reports went to Stalin, and Stalin made sure the Politburo saw them. The accusation was never formally stated. It did not have to be. The whisper campaign was enough. Zhukov the hero. Zhukov the looter. Zhukov who thought he was above the rules. The man who won the war was being reframed as a corrupt opportunist who had stolen from the people. In 1947, Stalin demoted him again. Zhukov was removed from Odessa and sent to the Urals military district, even farther from Moscow, even farther from power, even more invisible. At meetings of the general staff, his name stopped being mentioned. His photograph was removed from official histories of the war. When the victory parade of 1945 was shown in newsreels, the footage was edited. Zhukov's face was cut out. And here is the part that destroys you when you really think about it. Zhukov knew exactly what was happening. He knew Stalin was erasing him. He knew that if he protested, if he fought back, if he said one word about injustice or ingratitude, he would be arrested. His wife would be arrested. His daughters would be sent to camps. So he said nothing. He commanded his district. He filed his reports. He waited. Stalin died in March 1953. Zhukov was 56 years old. He had spent 8 years in internal exile, 8 years being slowly suffocated. When the news came, Zhukov did not celebrate. He did not even speak about it. But something shifted. In June 1953, Nikita Khrushchev needed help. Lavrenti Beria, the head of the secret police, was making a move for total power. Khrushchev needed someone the military trusted, someone who could act quickly, someone who hated Beria as much as he did. He called Zhukov, and Zhukov came. On June 26, 1953, Zhukov walked into a Politburo meeting with a group of armed officers. They arrested Beria. It was a coup, a quiet one. Beria was executed 6 months later, and Zhukov was rehabilitated. He was made Minister of Defense. His name reappeared in the histories. His photograph went back on the walls. For a few years, it looked like the nightmare was over. But power has a memory under men like Khrushchev. In 1957, Khrushchev faced a challenge from the so-called anti-party group. Molotov, Malenkov, Kaganovich, the old Stalinists who wanted him gone. Zhukov intervened again. He mobilized military transport to fly Khrushchev's allies to Moscow for the Central Committee vote. He saved Khrushchev. Again. 4 months later, Khrushchev removed him. Zhukov was in Yugoslavia on a state visit when the order came. The Central Committee had voted. He was dismissed as Minister of Defense. He was expelled from the Presidium. The charges were vague: Bonapartism, promoting his own cult of personality, undermining party control of the military. What it meant in plain language was this: you are too powerful. You are too loved. You scare us. Zhukov flew home. He was met at the airport by an aide who told him not to go to his office. He was retired. Immediately. No ceremony, no farewell, no acknowledgement of what he had done. He was 61 years old. He spent the next 17 years in a state dacha outside Moscow. He was not arrested. He was not exiled. He was simply forgotten. He wrote his memoirs. The censors gutted them. He attended Victory Day parades. He was allowed to stand in the back. When foreign journalists asked to interview him, the requests were denied. When Soviet citizens wrote him letters thanking him, the letters were intercepted. He lived in a house provided by the state, surrounded by gardens he tended himself, watched by men who reported on his visitors. His wife later said that he never spoke about Stalin with bitterness. He spoke about him the way you speak about weather, as a fact, as something that happened to you that you survived. But she also said that he had nightmares until the end. Dreams where he was back in the war. Dreams where he was being court-martialed. Dreams where he was standing in front of Stalin and Stalin was smiling. Georgy Zhukov died on June 18, 1974. He was 77 years old. He was given a state funeral. His body was cremated and his ashes were buried in the Kremlin wall, the place reserved for Soviet heroes. Brezhnev gave a speech. He called Zhukov a great son of the Communist Party. He did not mention that the party had spent decades trying to erase him. I have been thinking about what Zhukov's story means, because the obvious reading is real, but it is not the whole thing. The obvious reading is that Stalin feared Zhukov's popularity, and Khrushchev feared his independence, and the system could not tolerate a man who was loved for something other than ideology. That is all true. But the whole thing is simpler and more human than that. Zhukov was punished for being necessary. Stalin needed him to win the war. Khrushchev needed him to consolidate power. But necessity is not the same as trust. And the moment you are no longer necessary, the moment the crisis passes, the men you saved will remember that you saw them weak, that you saw them afraid, that you were the one they called when they could not save themselves, and they will hate you for it. Zhukov saved the Soviet Union twice, once from the Nazis, once from Beria. And both times, the men he saved waited until it was safe, and then they destroyed him. Not with a bullet, with obscurity, with silence, with the slow suffocation of being turned into a footnote in your own story. He spent 43 years in the Red Army. He commanded millions of men. He accepted the surrender of the Third Reich, and he died in a dacha outside Moscow, tending a garden, waiting for letters that never came. That is what it cost to be the man Stalin could not kill. Thank you for being here for this one. Zhukov's story is one that I think deserves more attention than it usually gets, not as a simple tale of totalitarian ingratitude, but as a human story about what happens when your value is also your threat. If this story reached you, hit the like button. Subscribe if you are not already here and leave a comment. Tell me what you think about Zhukov, about whether he could have done anything differently, about what it means to be loved for the wrong reasons by the wrong people. See you in the next one.